What's up, it's Red here. So this video is going to be about helping you read books better, helping you get more knowledge out of books quicker, and helping you learn whatever it is that you need to learn so you can accomplish your goals with reading books, hopefully being a big part of that. So this video is going to be a little different than the ones I've posted so far. I want this one to be a little more casual, more like we're kind of just hanging out having a conversation rather than me just dumping a bunch of information on your head. So this one will be a little more informal. There are a few things I've learned that would have been helpful to me at the start of my book reading journey, and I want to share those with you. So let's get into my tips for being a better reader. Coming up. All right, coming out of the gate hot. First tip. It's important to balance intentionally choosing the books you read with whatever you're feeling curious about in that moment. And what I mean by that is, I think I got a little bit addicted to just like learning stuff for a while. Like anything, I just wanted to learn it. I wanted to know it. And I think it helps to just take a step back for a second and chill out and ask yourself, like, why do I even want to read this book in the first place? Like, how does this book fit into my plan for whatever it is that I'm trying to improve on or learn? I remember I first heard this guy, Wyatt Woodsmall, say this. He said that learning is behavior change. Like, you're not really learning anything if your behavior doesn't change as a result of you hearing it or learning it. And if it's not impacting your life, it's just going to be an increase in factual, intellectual knowledge, but you haven't really learned anything. To really learn something is to be able to translate it into your life, into thinking differently, taking actions that are different, and helping it form something tangible in your experience. I think some people go through these periods of their life where they don't read that much, and then they start to feel guilty about not reading, like, oh, I really should start reading more. And then they just pick up something and just read just for the sake of reading so that they feel better, but they're not really like intentionally reading. So you need to prioritize your learning, but on the other hand, it's important to balance that with reading whatever you're curious about in that moment. So if you start reading a book and you're just like really having trouble paying attention and staying with it, then don't feel bad about just tossing it to the side for a little while and reading something else. If it's a real struggle for you to get through and you're constantly drifting away, you're probably not actually going to remember or absorb the information anyway. So just toss it aside, find something that you're wanting to dig into at that moment that you're curious about, and that will help you actually stay engaged with the material and really learn it so that it can have an impact on your life. Okay, so the next tip I think is helpful. So I read a speed reading book a few years ago called Breakthrough Rapid Reading. And I had taken some speed reading classes back in high school before when I was getting ready for the ACT exam. I won't go into that whole story now, but essentially the reading section was the only thing holding me back from having like a fantastic ACT score. So I was like, God, I just can't read fast enough to do well in this fucking ACT reading section. Like, I'm crushing all the other sections, but the reading section was like my arch nemesis, like a huge thorn in my side. I just couldn't read fast enough. I would get through like 1.5 of the 4 sections in the allotted time amount. So I had taken some speed reading classes in the past, so I kind of had known about them. I knew speed reading was something that existed. But in this book, they recommend that you follow along with your finger in books as you're reading. So like, as you're reading a book, you're following along like with the line that you're reading with your finger. And this actually really helps a lot. It helps you push through the book. It helps keep your eyes focused on what you're reading. And it helps you, like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I would like read something and then I'd like forget what I just read, or I didn't know what I just read. So then I would have to go back and read it. But reading along with your finger really helps you not have that problem anymore. And once you get used to it, you'll actually start naturally reading a lot faster. Well, I don't know about a lot faster, but you'll read faster. But just to back up a sec, it'll feel super awkward at first when you start to do it. Like, I remember I never used to do this, and then I started trying it out. The first time I was reading a book, I was sitting in the airport waiting for my flight. And I was just sitting there in the airport trying to read like this, like, like I felt like a book reading psycho robot person or something. Like everyone's probably thinking I'm a weirdo over here reading like this, but now I do it all the time, shamelessly, because it really works and I think it'll be a helpful tip for you. But one thing I'll tell you is if you do that, if you're reading books and following along with your finger slightly touches the book. And this for me was making my finger like raw. It was really uncomfortable for me to slide my finger like across the book and across it and across it and across it. And if the pages are glossy too, like in some of those textbooks, your finger like snags on the page and it just doesn't work that well. So what I do, one of the most important tools in my learning arsenal, Pilot G2 pens. I don't know if this is in focus or not, but you can use other pens too if you want, but these are by far my favorite pens. I have shitloads of these laying around the house, but what I do is instead of using my finger, I'll just follow along with this book or with this pen in the book with the pen shut, and then when I want to underline something, click it, and then go back to reading and following along. So I almost never read something without a Pilot G2 with me. So make an investment in some Pilot G2s. You will not be disappointed with your purchase. All right, so now that I've said that, I'm excited to announce this channel's first prize giveaway. Woo! I'm going to be giving away a pack of Pilot G2 pens to a lucky viewer once we get 20 unique comments on this video. Once we hit 20 unique comments from 20 individual people, I will pick a random commenter and send them a pack of Pilot G2s of their choosing. They make different colors and different millimeters, so you can pick whichever color or millimeter you like the best, and I'll send you a pack. Any comment counts as valid entry into the contest. Just subscribe to the channel and comment anything below, and you'll be entered to win. And if we don't ever get to 20 comments for the rest of the history of this channel, then I guess nobody gets the pens, or maybe after like a year or so, I'll just cut it off and send somebody some pens as a surprise. They probably won't even remember they commented, but. So comment something below if you want to be entered into the contest. If you're watching this after the contest is over, I'm sorry. Make sure to keep up with my new videos for more chances to win. I'll probably do these prize giveaways more often because it's fun for me and it helps with the YouTube algorithm if you comment on my video. All right, so that leads into the next thing I wanted to talk about. Underline stuff that was meaningful to you or something that hit you hard or just the main point of a paragraph, just go ahead and underline it. It helps you stay engaged with your reading and it really helps you go back later and see what was important at the time that you read the book. So now a lot of times I'll find myself thinking about something I read in the past that I didn't quite remember that well. And I'll be like, I want to go back and see what that was again. And it's a lot easier if you can go back and just reference in a book stuff that you've underlined. Like, this is just an example of a book. This book's called How to Read a Book. It's an awesome book. But in here you could maybe see, I don't know if this is focusing, but it's full of underlines and stars and stuff of like main points of the paragraphs. Like while you're reading a book, there's usually a bunch of filler and then like main points. And if you go ahead and underline those main points, it really helps you like go back and see and read the book again much more efficiently. Or now if I'm researching something for a video, I can see what I thought was important at the time that I read it and some of the key highlights and punchlines of books. And so I can go back and flip through really quickly and find the best parts and pull those out of the book to make videos for you. And if you're reading anything worthwhile, it's probably not going to stick 100% the first time you read it. So underlining and taking notes in books makes rereading them for the second time a lot more efficient. All right, so this next tip is one that I think really trips up a lot of people, and I know that I had this wrong way of thinking for a while too. And this tip is that you don't have to read a book cover to cover, like start to finish. I think some people put this arbitrary rule on themselves where like they have to read a book and what they do is they start from the beginning and they read the first word and then they read the second word and then they read the third word and they read the whole thing in sequential order. And then once they've done that, then that means that they've read the book, but only after they've read it perfectly in sequential order. Nobody who reads any sort of books in volume does that. I'll tell you, nobody does that who reads a lot of books. But that's kind of how I thought it was at first. Like someone would ask me like, oh, did you read that book? And I don't know if I'm just like OCD or something, but I felt like I couldn't be honest in saying that I read a book if I hadn't read like every single word of the book. I think maybe I was just like unconscious that there was like strategies out there I could use to read books more efficiently than just reading them straight through. So I would read like chapter 1 and then chapter 2 and then chapter 3, but only after I had read the introduction and the foreword and the preface. But reading like that is dumb. It's not a good way to read. You need to skip around a little bit. Like read whatever you want, skip around, find the good stuff. Read the good stuff first. There are no rules in reading. And I don't know if this helps, but maybe it helps you. I officially give you permission to skip around in books and read the best parts first. Trust me, you are limiting yourself if you have the mindset of needing to read and finish books in sequential order. All right, so next tip, this is kind of similar to the previous tip, but whenever you start to read a book, you need to dig around in it a little bit. Like look at the introduction, read the book jacket, figure out like what the book is, smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, read some of the sentences in the book, figure out what the author's writing style is and like what the tone of the book is. Figure out like, is this gonna be a book that I have to sit down and really focus on, or is it written in sort of a fun way with some stories and narrative where it's not gonna be as hard to really get the juice out of it. It's helpful to figure out like how this book's structured and what you're about to be told in the book. So for example, what I mean by structure is like a book maybe has 3 main sections. And so you kind of dig in and figure out what those are. Like the author's gonna tell me this, and then he's gonna tell me something about this. And then this is the 3rd section. And then all this is going to wrap up. And the cumulative point that he's going to be making is roughly this. And so you have kind of like an idea of what it is that you're about to be told, so that as you're reading, you can kind of like anticipate what the points are that the author's about to make, so that you aren't like surprised and reading along line by line, like not knowing what the next line is going to say and always trying to guess about what it is that you're about to be told. Like I always do this before I start a book, and it really helps to be able to see kind of like where the book is going. So I don't think we're ever really taught very well, at least most people, how to read books for information, how to read different books differently. Like not all books are a narrative where if you started from the end, it would ruin the story. So we can go into more detail on this tip later in another video, but I wanted to give an introduction to it here so you can start doing this in your own reading. All right, so the next tip, buy a lot of books, even if you don't think you're gonna get around to them at that moment. I have always bought tons of books. I think it really helps me to just kind of look at them and think like, man, there's just so much knowledge up there that I've yet to absorb. So have a lot of books around you that you plan to eventually get to. I think this really can help you be more flexible with your learning plan. Instead of having to wait like 2 days for a book to get there on Amazon Prime, and by that time you probably totally lost your train of thought. Like a lot of times I'll think about a book, go read it for like an hour or two, and kind of be satisfied with that. Whereas if I had to wait a few days for it to get here, it just wouldn't be the same. Another thing, you shouldn't have read a large percentage of the books you own. I think a rule of thumb probably, if you've read more than 1/3 of your books, then you don't have enough books. Now that I say this, I hope no crazed Amazon resellers breaks into my house and like steals all my books or something. Like that would be my nightmare. Someone's just wheelbarrowing books out of my house. Like, hey, come back here. Come back with my books. But I understand buying all these books can get expensive. Well, on one hand, they're expensive, but on the other hand, they're actually pretty cheap as a bet. Like for $15, you could potentially get some knowledge that would be worth millions to you in the future. So just as like a side tangent, if you spent $15,000 on a ton of books, and just one of those books is the one book that like totally changed your life, totally changed your outlook on something, or how you viewed the world, and it allowed you to be successful and really formed like a big part of your life, then it would be worth it to you. Like $15,000 is not really that much money in the grand scheme of things. And you can buy tons of books, like 1,000 books for $15,000. It's crazy. But I know not everyone has the cash on hand necessarily to be buying like hundreds of books. So you need to at least have an Amazon wish list so that when you come across a book that you're interested in, that you want to buy, you might be thinking like, I don't know if I want to spend $20 on this book right now. You can at least add it to a wish list so that you can come back and buy it later. All right, so my next tip, I'm not necessarily as wed to this one, but buy physical books. I've tried to use the Kindle a few times, but I've always found myself going back to physical books. I think something about flipping through the physical book and underlining it and taking notes and being able to like quickly thumb through it and see like the headlines of the different sections. And it's a lot easier to do the inspectional reading that I talked about before with a physical book. But I guess do whatever you want though. I know a lot of people who really love the Kindle, who read a lot of books. So it's not bad. Physical books are just my personal preference. Maybe I'm just like old school or something. But if you find yourself not really able to read or focus on the Kindle, it's not because you're a bad reader or anything. There's other people too that have that issue. It may be just because you would do better reading physical books. All right, next one. I'm not sure this is really like a tip per se, but another thing to think about is if a book's not confusing to you, then are you really learning anything by reading it? Because when you're reading a book, are you really learning anything if you don't go from not knowing something to knowing something? And in order for you to do that, you would have to not know something in the first place. You have to kind of be confused about what it is that you're reading. So it's pretty normal to be reading a book and thinking like, I'm not sure that I completely understand what this book is saying. So if you expect reading books and learning things to just be reading books all the time and you just constantly sucking up information at a constant pace, it's not going to work that way. You're going to be confused, and if you don't like being confused, then you're going to quit. So just know that everyone is confused when they read books. That's how it's supposed to be. And if you're not confused, then you're probably not learning anything from that book anyway. That book is not challenging enough to you if it's not pushing you and making you think and making you a little confused. But I don't think this is necessarily a hard and fast rule that applies 100% of the time. Like sometimes you'll read something and it'll just be immediately intelligible to you, but just something to think about. And on a similar note to that, when you go into reading a book, try to go into it with an empty mind. Like remove yourself a little bit and your beliefs and opinions before you start reading a book. In Zen, they like to say, empty your cup. Like if you think you already know something, then you're not going to go into it with an open mind. You're not going to be in the right place to really contemplate a certain idea without it being clouded by all the stuff that you think that you already know. I don't remember who exactly said this, but some philosopher guy said something like, the mark of a wise man is that he can entertain an idea without accepting it. And if you want to learn some shit, you're going to have to read and study a lot of different perspectives and figure out where you stand on some stuff and what your opinions are. You can't just read all of the same type of books all the time. It just turns into this little like echo chamber and you don't actually learn anything. You will never change your mind if you think you already know what's right, what the correct thing is. You will never get any new perspective if you insist on staying locked into the perspective that you currently have. So come at it with an open mind. I remember watching a Bill Gates documentary on Netflix. That one, I don't remember what it's called. It's like Inside Bill's Brain. But the one thing that he said that I thought was really important was his advice to his younger self was something like, your worldview is way too simple. Like you have a totally unsophisticated view of the world. Like that would be his advice to his younger self. And I could definitely relate to that. And I think I still suffer from that a little bit. I think we can all probably take that statement to heart a little bit and try to figure out like the areas in our lives where our worldview is maybe a little too simplified and we're holding our opinions a little too strong, and we need to loosen up a little bit. What else? Get some big ass bookshelves. You'll need a place for your books. Also make sure you get some of these guys to hold your books up. Get some of these black bookends too. They're super cheap and they'll make sure your books don't fall over. Maybe one of these guys too, like a little reading chimp. All right, and lastly, go at your own pace. If you remember earlier, I talked about me being a slow reader, and I used to think I was a bad reader. I remember on those reading comprehension tests in elementary school, I would always do really bad on those tests, and I think teachers would tell me that I had poor reading comprehension, like that was an area I really needed to work on. And so I developed these beliefs about myself that like I was a bad reader, and so I would carry that around with me for a little while, like maybe I just wasn't good at reading something I just naturally was bad at. But I'll tell you that, I mean, I do read kind of slow. It's just how my brain works. But the bigger thing is like once I found something that I was interested in and I really wanted to learn it, my curiosity to learn it and my desire to know totally overpowered like my thoughts about me being a bad reader. Like it wasn't even a thing. I'm just like reading because I wanted to know the information. So it's important to have a growth mindset. It's like we can talk about that more in the future, but you will learn things and you will get better at reading just from reading. But everyone's minds are different. Our brains are just wired differently to understand and read things. Like some people you'll come across are just like freak readers who will tell you that they read a book in an hour. And I'm like, how in the heck did you read a book in an hour? And then you ask them about it and they remembered it all. It's like, it's crazy. But not everyone's like that. Just remember to enjoy what you read. I've always found that learning new things is really enjoyable. So get fascinated, get curious about stuff, and you'll find yourself just going down these different rabbit holes. And I found it to be like one of the most rewarding things that I do in my life. So, all right, so there you go. Those are, I think, 13 tips to help you be a better reader. One thing I'll say is these things are just what work for me. You got to find your own methods, and these are just my methods. So feel free to test some of them out, but ultimately you have got to experiment with what works for you and figure that out for yourself. And if you're not enjoying reading and learning, then you're going to quit. So find what works for you so that you're able to enjoy it. That's the most important thing, is that if you enjoy learning, you're going to stick with it and you're going to get better at it over time. Like enjoying something, I think, is the most important thing. You want to have longevity in learning and reading, and if you don't enjoy it, it's not going to work out for you for the long term. I also realized that as I was making this video, I actually have like 50 or 100 tips, and I could honestly keep on talking in this video for hours, but I had to cut it off somewhere. So I'll do some more videos on this stuff in the future, but I wanted to give you a little intro here so that you can get started implementing these tips. Also, let me know what you thought of this style of video. It's a little more personable, and it's honestly a hell of a lot easier for me to kind of just go off the cuff without scripting out most of my video. But it's probably a less efficient communication. I'm not able to be as precise with my word choice as I would be if it was more planned. And I'm not able to make as airtight of points as I would in my other videos. So I don't know. Let me know if you like this video better or worse than the other ones. I'll probably do a mix of styles for now. But anyway, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to smash the like button, please. It helps out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And also, don't forget to comment below to be entered into the contest to win the Pilot G2s. This is huge. I don't think you guys understand. These are Pilot G2s, the best pens that have ever been created by mankind. I don't know if the best, but best bang for your buck. So with that said, read out. See you later. See you in the next one. See you in the next video. Later. Peace.